episode of geekoutdoors.com. And this episode is kind of different. This is actually a talk with my brother, who's an Uber geek. And we call this the Geek Bros Talk. So obviously geeks and brothers talking. And so this is basically one geek talking to another Uber geek. And this is my brother. He's going to introduce himself. And, we really don't have a specific format. We just talk about stuff that's really geeky. So go ahead, bro.
Yo, guys, what's up? I'm Kenny, as you said. I'm his brother. And yeah, he's the very first one to get me the whole geek lifestyle, I guess, ever since, my conception. So I've always looked up to him. And yeah, he's just always been there for me to inspire me and push me in this direction, definitely.
So what are some of the things that is interesting to you, or basically kind of like what is your background in geek? Because a lot of people who watch this channel, they're like everything from like real basic geek to like super hardcore geek programming.
Exactly.
So give us a little background.
For me, I'm a developer by trade. So, mostly coding, making websites. I do a bit of design here and there, or graphic design. Just basically anything with a computer, any type of electronics, video editing. I'm not really into producing music, but I would be super interested in doing that. But other than that, I have a pretty decent knowledge on hardware, things going on in the hardware industry. Build my own PC at the moment. I'm really into mechanical keyboards, so I've been doing a lot of work with that. And I guess you could even say like to the point where I love cars too, so I'd be a car geek. So pretty much everything, video games, music, just a whole lifestyle, I guess. So I don't really have a specialty, but I do like to dabble in a bit of everything.
Okay, now one of the things is, like I was stating a little, we have some really Uber geeks who watch my channel, and can you like give some of your like Uber geekness? Like for example, my brother, he does web development, and can you talk about some programming languages you like? And then you showed your keyboard, mechanical keyboard. I know you've worked on Arduino boards and stuff. Is there like, can you give us a little more of your geekness? Because sometimes people want to test your geekness,
Of course. I'm not going to claim expertise in the whole keyboard, Arduino, the maker scene, right? So I'm just not getting into it. It's pretty fun. I have a basic knowledge of, like circuit boards and computer engineering at a very basic level, because I did take a few classes in college. So for web dev, it's more the modern web dev. Try and use and live on the bleeding edge, right? So every new like technology, languages, frameworks that come out, it all moves by so quickly. So in the web development front, I've been getting into a lot of more automation, right? Or automating my development processes. So just making things like easier, faster, automated builds, automated configurations, like hardware as a configuration, things like that, deploying, auto deploy, things like that. Specifically, if for the hardcore developers out there, just working with a lot of Gulp.js right now, which kind of does your testing, building, deployment, just scripting it pretty much. So even like to the point where it refreshes my page for me as soon as I make a save or a change. So it just cuts down on development time like way quicker. As far as the maker stuff, like I said, started getting into it. I was really introduced to it with mechanical keyboards. And it's more of like the best way I could compare it, it's like running shoes, right? You can buy a crappy pair of running shoes. You can buy a crappy keyboard, but it's not necessarily, you don't enjoy it maybe, or you won't know what, how to enjoy, I guess, a higher end or something like that, right? So, mechanical keyboards definitely aren't necessary, but it's just better quality of life to me. So I got a mechanical keyboard, just started looking into it. I think a lot of these gaming keyboards is everyone's first forte into mechanical keyboards. And from there, the first thing I did was, get different key sets. And now to the point where I'm like swapping out switches and, pretty close to even making my own mechanical keyboard, which is just, would be like a Arduino powered or basically a SoC powered, right? Like a Teensy or something. And then just hand wiring it.
So why would anybody spend that time, doing all that just for a keyboard? I think like a general consumer, they really wouldn't get that. And even if you're a gamer, most gamers, they are not going to go out and program their own keyboards or make it. Why would you even go that far? What benefit do you get?
So definitely a hobby for me, right? I need some time away from development, and this kind of help furthers my development, and just a different type of development, even for me. The main reasons for me getting into it is the customers being able to customize it, every single little detail. So I love that about it. And almost do the same thing with a car too, right? Everyone has a car, but when you customize it, make it your own, to what you want exactly,
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that the geek community as a whole, they can relate with. We love to tinker things. We love to, I would hate to say it, but I think a lot of geeks, we're actually like control freaks. We want to control everything from the software all the way down to the board, all the way down to the language if we can. And I don't know if that's just the nature of it. If you're like really into geeky stuff, I mean, I've always liked tinkering and stuff, but all of that stuff takes a lot of time. And so, a lot of us, like, we know a little bit about everything, but when you specialize and you really focus on it, you can create some absolutely amazing things. I mean, like, what would you actually do with the mechanical keyboard when you're done? Like, how would it help you, like, on a day-to-day basis for people who wouldn't understand why you would do it?
So I would say the first thing is the switches. Mechanical keyboards come in many different variations of switches. So as you see, I have two different colors here. I have a blue one and a purple one on the bottom, which are the ones I'm putting in now. Basically, they just have a different feel to it. So the blue one are the clicky ones. So these are like the more gamery switches, right? So these are probably the most common ones. You go to any store, you'll see like a Razer or a Logitech that are mechanical, and those are great because it's pre-built for you. It's a nice feel, very, very good entry level, right? But for me, so again, going back to why you would want to customize your mechanical keyboard, the first one for me would be the switch type, the switch feel. So, as a developer, I'm spending 10, 12 hours a day on a computer, and just every stroke is satisfying, right? So it's kind of hard to go back to like a membrane keyboard, right? Or like a normal, regular keyboard. So definitely for me, switch feel is the biggest one. So, the blue ones are a lot quieter, but there's still tactile bump. So when you press down on a key, there's going to be like a little bump that you have to press, a bit harder. And that's when the switch actuates, or that's when the switch connects. The blue ones are much louder, clicky. Purple ones are clicky, not as clicky, but a lot quieter. So this is pretty good for a work environment. It's very smooth, it just feels great to type on. Like sleeping on a really nice mattress or having a really nice pair of running shoes, right? So for running shoes too, again, the different factors, you could be like light, breathable, shape, comfort, feel. It's almost the same thing with a keyboard. So, first switch feel, switch type, like how it actually is typing on a keyboard. Second would be probably form factor. So you can't see it on this one, but this is a 60% keyboard, and it doesn't have a F row key. So you just have the number keys, your letters, and then your bottom spacebar row, right? So whereas this one is a 75% with the F keys and even a dedicated arrow cluster. This one doesn't have an arrow cluster. So, for me as a developer, I would like to travel a lot. Try and keep my backpack as small as possible, as minimal as possible, which brings me to my next point. This is Bluetooth enabled. So when I'm working with my Surface, there's 0 wires, just my Surface, my wireless keyboard, and my wireless mouse. So this is like the huge selling point for me on this board, just that it's integrated with Bluetooth capabilities. It's just less wires, and I don't know, it just feels nice to have like a non-cluttered working environment. And yeah, go ahead.
Oh, and speaking of which, do you have your bag? Because it's amazing how many things you're able to fit in there. And since you are able to customize your own board, you could fit a lot more than what most normal people would carry in their bag. Do you have that?
Yeah, sure. So this bag I feel like I'm just pimping products at this point. But so this bag, super light. And when choosing a backpack, I want it to go as light as possible. If I ever commuted, on a train or a bus or whatever. So this is extremely thin backpack. You can fit maybe one textbook. That's how thin it is. Otherwise, it starts to bulge out and not really work out. But there's, two pouches. So the first one is just like a bunch of straps so you can organize your wires and all these small things. So for me, I would have my mouse and then my keyboard right here and my power plug and stuff for my Surface. So yeah, again, extremely light. And then I have the Surface itself, which I don't have with me right now. But I think it's like 1.5 pounds compared to a traditional laptop, which may be upwards of 4 or 5, right?
Wow.
MacBooks are a lot lighter. I think a MacBook's probably around 2.5. But so 1.5 pounds is extremely lightweight. We're talking like tablet weight, right? Which it is. It's just a tablet. And the reason why I chose to go with Surface Pro instead of a traditional laptop, even though it costs a little more, I wasn't going to use a laptop anyways, right? Because I'm going to be bringing my mechanical keyboard. So that just pretty much sealed the deal. Light, no keyboard, pretty powerful for what it is. And using a touchscreen is actually really helpful. Drawing diagrams for people like very quickly, taking notes. But yeah, that's just my setup, my personal setup, my personal preference. And I love it. Again, it's just preference and just it feels nice to work on.
Now, so how heavy is your total bag? About 5 pounds, maybe?
Not even. Maybe 3, maybe a little less than 3, maybe 2.5, I would guess.
Cool. Now, one of the things that my community, they like is, and there's a lot of them. I mean, I could see it from the amount of videos that they watch is a lot of people love Linux. I love Linux, myself. But I myself, I'm always under the belief that I use whatever tool is best for the job. So I'm not like like a Uber fanboy of certain things, like meaning some people are so into it that they would not use anything else.
Of course.
So in this case, I do have a lot of videos where I talk about moving from Windows 10 to Linux, but it's an option. And so here, you also run not just Windows, you also run Linux as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you use Linux on a daily basis?
So for web development, basically Node. I do a lot of development with Node, which is basically a kind of package manager, I guess. And they have like the NPM, which is the Node package manager. Anyways, it just works flawlessly on Linux. I tried it on Windows once, and it just wasn't having it. I had like the wrong C compiler, or it just didn't work. It's just very basic things like trying to download a package. It just didn't work on Windows. So this one I started opted to the Linux route, and honestly, Linux is becoming a standard. Obviously, it more and more prevalent, through the development world as like the standard backend. Just everything runs on Linux. It's secure, it's reliable, it's fast, customizable. It almost no reason. It's not bloated, and you customize it to your needs. Yeah, seeing Windows as a backend, I don't even know if that's a thing anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they still have Windows servers, but like, no, just needs Linux. But for me, again, so I use a Arch Linux installation. It's just running in a VirtualBox. I do my actual coding in the Windows environment. So, my editor, I'm not a hardcore like VI or Vim guy. I'm trying to. Again, that's a super hardcore geek thing, right? When you just like solely prefer V or VI, I'm not at that level, but that takes years and years and years of practice, right?
Yeah, and I could relate with that because when I was in the corporate world, we did everything on Oracle databases, and everything was Unix backend. So it was all Solaris. Mostly it was all Solaris, and we did everything obviously through command line. And so you have to learn VI, or you have to be able to write scripts, and so that took a long time. And if I had to do it now, I couldn't do it. And but if you're really good at it, you could do things really quickly, and you could automate a lot of things. So it's still very powerful if you know how to do it, and that's one of the things that I do like about Linux, where underneath it, if you get into it, you could really get into the nitty gritty of the system and learn some really uber technical stuff. Yeah. But as you were just saying, in terms of the backend for the servers, I think it's primarily Linux now. There are still Unix backends, but it's moving more and more towards Linux. And we talked about a little bit about web development. A lot of your web development, wouldn't you say that it's done on Android as well? A lot of it?
What do you mean done on Android?
Like whenever you are programming your front end, right?
Mhm.
Is it made for a specific OS, like whether it be
Okay.
iOS,
Yeah,
Android, or is it like independent of platforms? How do you go
I
about it when
gotcha.
you're developing?
So, as a web developer, it's prevalent on all platforms, right? Like you can visit a website, have it be mobile ready, desktop ready, tablet ready. Those like, the main three areas. So I focus on like a lot of actual like HTML web development. I mean, I'm full stack, so I do back end, middleware, graphic design as well. Um, but back to your point, if it's like, program only for Android or only for iOS, like the proprietary stuff, right? I think my first approach would, just make a web page. And if I need to use the hardware capabilities, I would probably go into the hybrid state, which is basically just a web page packaged as a Android app or an iOS app, but it'll give you hooks into like the hardware of the phone, right? So you need to take a picture, GPS. Auto development is still technically web page stuff, but you have access to those hardware. I know performance probably, and it may not be the best at the moment, but it's one of those things where you code once, but it works everywhere. Whereas developing a separate Android app and a separate iOS app, when Android uses Java and iOS uses Swift and Objective C, right?
Yeah, and that was one of the original ideas with Java, right? Write
Mhm.
once, run everywhere, but
Mhm.
it never really got there,
Yeah.
because you have to go through the JVM, and it's kind of slow.
Yeah.
JavaScript kind of does something similar,
Uh,
but
yeah. For me, developing and prototyping in JavaScript, HTML, it's super quick for me. It's flexible. We're at a point now where our web browsers are extremely powerful. Before you had to have the back end or the servers do a lot of the processing and rendering for you. Nowadays, your web browser is basically a thin client.
yeah,
You can do a lot with it.
and that's the thing that I think, and you being in the development world, you understand that, you see that ahead. But very smart companies like Google, they knew this. That's why they came out with the Chromebooks. And when it first came out, I mean, it felt kind of stupid, right? Why would you buy a computer for just a browser? But they knew
Just the
that,
browsing, yeah.
yeah, this was coming. And so in the future, we won't really have an app store, right? Like we are used to. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be everything web-based anyway. And since our computers, everything's going to be so internet connected, you won't even notice the difference between a native app versus a web app. I mean, is that the
Exactly.
idea? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the idea. As far as accessibility goes, right? Like you said, just do a Google search instead of downloading the app. You just click on a link, just making things quicker, faster, more convenient.
Yeah, and I've noticed that, I think this was last year, I did do a video about it, but Google or Alphabet, the name of the company now, they're actually going to merge Android OS and also, I'm sorry, the Chrome OS with Android. And so it's going to be one singular platform. And I think every company, Apple, if you notice like their Mac OS and their iOS, they're looking very similar in terms of functionality. They're trying to streamline everything. And Windows does the same thing, right? And so I think everything is heading towards whatever you're doing right now. Just one uniform place, a few tools. I know there's a lot involved, but uniformity, where somebody has a user experience here on this device, whether it's a laptop, TV. Yeah, it'll be the same across any type of platform. And that's with Apple TV, that's with Android TV. I think whatever you're doing now, that's the future. And a few years ago, I thought it was just, I mean, I kind of saw it, but I was like, this isn't going to work, I mean,
yeah, it definitely had its rough beginnings. If you remember when Android first came out, 1.0, even I think my first Android phone was like an Android 2.2 or something like that. It was good. It was, back then, but looking back, holy crap, that was like 6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
Jesus. But yeah, like as you said, we're at a point where, even 1 year old, 2 year olds know how to use an iPad before even talking, right? So from our perspective, we grew up without it, and then we saw like the rise and the development of it, and now it's just a norm, right?
So what are
going to continue to be in that, following that trend of where it's just natural, right? You don't even like second guess it. It'd be weird to not have it, at this point. So it's definitely like heavily integrated into our lives. And the same thing, like what you said about making a uniform platform or experience too, right? Maybe it's just something that we're not, most users aren't really conscious about, right? Like to the end user, not to like a developer or like a hardcore geek, or they wouldn't notice these things. But as a, end user, it's like, oh, this is nice, and they just use it, right? Just works.
Yeah, and that's the whole idea, right? I mean, whatever we're doing in the back end, it's primarily to serve the consumer. If it was really truly all about serving people who are geeks, right? And I mean, I'm kind of like niching us down, but if it's just truly for geeks, it would look all command lines. It would look, we would not care about user experience or anything like that. Right? It would be more about efficiency and features.
It's not that we don't care about the user experience. It would be the geek user experience, right?
That's true. That's true. Not a lot of hand holding, right? Like go figure it out.
Some customizability, flexible, being able to do what you want to do with it, right?
So, like we try to do this, hopefully we're going to try to do this regularly, but like what are some of the things like interest you in tech or geekdom right now that you're interested in?
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time, shout out to Reddit, our mechanical keyboards, games. I follow like the League of Legends pro scene, even computer hardware. I'm not a hardcore hardware guy, but I do have like some understandings of like what Intel's doing, what AMD's doing, what video cards are coming out, just like the general development with that, and just kind of like keeping with the news. I understand it from a pretty good level, but nothing like super low level or super gritty, right?
So is that like where you would get most of your news in terms of like what's really going on in tech? Is Reddit? Is that a place that you enjoy going?
Yeah, just because the quality of the contributions is pretty good over there, it's reliable. I trust it. I don't really second guess the conversations that people have on it, right? Because they know what they're talking about. Whereas, if I go to a news site, they're not vetted for me, I guess, like I don't know the quality of normal news postings, or I don't know. For me, Reddit, like you said, even like a unified user experience, I just go there for all my news, right? I don't keep up with like a lot of different sites, like individual sites.
Yeah, that's really an interesting point, because I think a lot of people nowadays, even people who are general consumers, a lot of their news, they get it from, I would consider Reddit almost like a social media network. They get a lot of their news, a lot of what's going on in their communities from their social media platforms versus going to a news site, or
they kind of, so what Reddit, the people do like the hard lifting for you. They'll gather news from all over the internet and just put it in one place. So for me, it's like, I don't have to look very far, right? Someone else has already done it for me. So, I mean, of course, forums are like crowdsourced, but for me, this is like crowdsourced news, right? This is like what's hot. It's a live, conversation. It's living. It's always like, because the way Reddit works, right? The post is just by how popular it is, and a post may really be prevalent for like a couple of days at most, So it's always showing you the latest conversations, the latest trends, the latest news, really.
And so I would gather just by looking at some Reddit posts, a lot of the news that we get, it's, how can I say it? It's controlled, meaning
Right.
You're going to see a lot of the same posts over and over because that's what makes the news and that's what fed into the news outlets. Reddit, to me, it seems more like democratic, right? As much as it could be. So whoever has the best stories, and not just like I guess drama, right? It's actually going to get moved up, and it's actually going to stay up there. Even YouTube now, it's mostly about, it looks like TV to me. A lot of drama, reality TV show type stuff. And so, whereas Reddit, I don't think it's gotten there yet,
It's, for me, I mean, there's definitely some bias on some set of Reddits, but to me, it's a pretty objective standpoint. You'll see people with lots of differing opinions on there, right? So, like, if it's a news site, the news site would put their twist on it, whether they're like trying to pimp a product because they're working with whatever product maker. But for Reddit, it's objective to me. And I kind of draw my own facts and my own conclusions from reading it. It's not too biased. It's not trying to sway me in one way or the other way. It just gives you an objective stance and people talking about it, right?
Yeah, and one thing that I think a lot of people do, or I would assume a lot of geeks do, is that they just take things with a grain of salt for the most part, because I think most people who are in the geek world, they are very analytical, and they're very inquisitive. And so they might see a piece of news and then they'll verify it. I do, at least I do. I'll look around and
to make sure it's valid, right?
Yeah. And
back in school, they used to tell me, don't use Wikipedia as your source. Which is a lot of BS, I think. And now the same people who are saying that, they probably, feed or something. I mean, when you compare it from like a Facebook feed to like Reddit, Facebook is just, I don't know. I feel like most of the content on there is just not very legitimate, Well, how much can you trust a Facebook feed?
Well, a lot of the Facebook feeds, and I've used Facebook from the back end. It's great for marketers. I use what's called the Power Editor, and it's a wonderful ad platform. And so a lot of what you see, it's targeted. It's very ad specific, and so they have so much analytics on people that we could target you in any way. And so me personally, I don't think Facebook is a place where people really go to get information. That's my personal opinion.
I think it's definitely demographics, right? Because on Facebook, I don't have a lot of like developer friends, hardcore geeks. It's just my everyone outside that realm. So it's more into, I guess it's interesting to see their viewpoint on things like this is how they perceive the news or what's going on or what's hot. And so I take that back. It's not that Facebook feeds aren't legitimate or anything. It really depends on or your friends really, because they're the ones posting, sharing. So maybe I just need to make more developer friends. So.
Yeah, and as you probably know, I've seen a growing trend that a lot of people, especially in the younger demographic, they have already moved past Facebook. And even I would even say, quote unquote, newer platforms like Snapchat, even that is becoming kind of old too. I mean, once
Instagram.
Yeah. I mean, once the companies get a hold of it, they understand how to use it. They're going to use it for marketing purposes. That's what I use it for. Even though I would like to think that a lot of people use it to get other things besides that. I mean, eventually all platforms become monetized, because they have to, because if not, the business is running and will go out of business because they need to make money. But do you know of any other up and coming platforms? Because you're probably in the demographic that would kind of see these things.
Sure. Platforms and just like social media stuff.
Yeah, social media. I mean, the trend that I'm seeing, and I think a lot of people are seeing, everything's going more towards video. But I wanted to know if you knew of any other up and coming social media platforms.
Not really. And my stance on that is all these social media platforms, they do the same exact thing, but the user experience is just a little different. And sometimes you get bored of the mundane or repetitious, right? Like, I've been using Facebook for like 10 years and I don't even use it anymore. It doesn't appeal to me anymore. And the same thing with Snapchat. It's really cool when it's fun and it's new, right? But maybe in a couple of years it'll start to die out for me. I'm not talking about like as a whole. So for new and upcoming platforms, and I try not to dive into a lot of things at one time, right? I like to have my small things that I really trust, like, I don't know. So for up-and-coming platforms, no, not really. I just stay in the realm of, Reddit, Snapchat every once in a while. I don't even use Instagram. I don't use Twitter either or Facebook. So
yeah, I'm kind of the same way. And, we are in different age demographics. Like for myself, I primarily use my platforms for my business, my daily things that I do, and so YouTube obviously is my favorite platform. And all of these platforms, they take a long time to learn. And so some people will feel like you should be everywhere, but unless you have a team of people working for you, it's extremely difficult to be everywhere. So I primarily focus on YouTube and Snapchat, and I could see the value in that. And in terms of marketing, I'm using Facebook. I'm using actually Bing. It might sound crazy, but Bing's growing as well in different ways. And so I'm really interested on the marketing, the technology aspect of it. But in terms of like platforms and social media, I just think it takes so much time for you to spend on it, you know, to actually use it in a way that makes sense to your life. You know, I mean, obviously, if you're using it as a business, it is kind of different than it is using it for strengths in our life. But
even for your personal life, right? Like, what's your return investment? Like, how much time do I want to put in it to get the content that I want, right? So that's why I try to keep it simple and just not really spend too much time doing that. And so, you know, the ones I use now, it's perfect for me. Not to put that much effort in it, but I get a lot of great content out of it. But of course, it's different for everyone, right? Like some people have more time to spend doing that, being on Facebook, being on YouTube. Some people have time, but personally for me, I try not to spend too much time on that. So.
Yeah, it's a lot of time. I mean, that people spend on these platforms, and that's actually what everybody wants in terms of like, if you're on the back end of it, we want people to spend time on these platforms. You know, the longer they're on it, the eyeballs. The more eyeballs, and money is the most valuable asset that anybody has. So I was just thinking like, what interesting things, like I did some interesting tech things this week, at least for me. Sure. Did you do anything that was interesting for yourself?
Basically just work with the keyboard. So, you know, the process for this is I gotta desolder the switches on the end. So working on my soldering skills. So as far as tech goes, that's really been it on my side.
Now for myself, I did something really basic. This is as high tech as I go, but I did a video about it earlier in the week, but I did an episode called Goodwill Hunting. And what Goodwill Hunting is, I'll go to Goodwill and I found this really cool tripod. I just used it today. It's all metal. It's extremely heavy. It's made by a company. I didn't know much about this company, and I still couldn't find much. It's made by this company called Goldcrest, and it came in this really cool golf-looking bag. So this is really old. It's like probably from the 1970s. I paid $2 for this at Goodwill, and so
you can find some great deals at Goodwill, even mechanical keyboards.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So,
I've never.
Looking for that, definitely. Even older models, right? Like the popular Model M, like the really, really old school, like keyboards from the 70s and 80s. You can find those for like $1 or $2. If you even feel like it, you can flip it for much more than that.
Yeah, I do love Goodwill. I always find treasures, and you're right. They have the old mechanical keyboards there, but they also have old plugs, old monitors, and that was, I mean, as crazy as it sounds, that was a really fun thing. I enjoyed it, and I got something that I could actually use because this is solid. And the other thing that I'm planning to do is my Android phone. Okay, this is my old HTC One, and the latest version of Android just came out. Android Nougat, I think that's the name, Android 7.0. And so what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to upgrade my old HTC One. You know, I'm a firm believer that software, really good written software, can definitely prolong the life of your hardware. You know, because software changes every day.
Yeah.
So
I remember when I had my Droid X, I saw the custom firmware on it, right, or the custom OS, and that thing like prolonged it by a year, like hands down. You know, made it faster, better battery life, more reliable, convenient. Like there's an option where like you hold down like your home button, like the flashlight turns on. Like I never knew how much I wanted that and needed it until I'd use it, right? But yeah, so definitely great software, but I guess maybe it's not really pushed onto normal phones that much, or like your standard iPhone or Galaxy S or whatever, right? Because they want you to finish your 2-year cycle and then buy a new phone, right? But if you look out there a little bit and saw some custom firmware, you can definitely prolong the life of your phone. And even to me, I think phones may be plateauing a little bit. They're fast. Like we don't really need a huge leap, right? So, you know, each iteration that keeps on coming by, what do they change about it? A better screen, yeah, that's nice. But even our screens right now are more than fine, you know. A better camera, and that's really it to me.
Yeah.
You know, a few years ago, definitely like each iteration was a pretty huge leap, right, in terms of like speed, battery life, and things like that. So, what else can they improve on? Like, what do you think that phones really should, even if they need to improve, right?
Yeah. Well, my feeling is, you know, I did an episode about it too, where the Samsung Galaxy Note 7 was announced, and you know, I find it boring, you know, because And this was going to happen anyway. It happens in technology. As technology progresses, it becomes commodities, right? And so what's going to happen, in my opinion, that's going to make the smartphones exciting is the new form factor. And specifically, I'm talking about the flexible screens. Okay, Samsung and LG, Sony with the OLED thin screens like paper, and you could just use it. Now, I did work for Motorola a long time ago, and this was like almost 8 years, I would say 8 or 9 years ago. And at that time, we already had prototypes for wearables with your phone in there. Okay, it was built into the clothing. And now we're going to have flexible clothing. We're going to have contacts with actual screens on them. You know, wearables is going to be a huge thing. So I think for phones, it's going to be the flexible ones where you could just wrap it around your arm. That would be the next wave of technology. And I really believe companies like Samsung, LG, and Sony, they're going to be at the forefront because they own those patents, they own that tech.
So I feel like at that point, it's not even a phone anymore, right? It's just, you know, integrated into our way of lives, like make it more seamless, right?
Yeah.
Just, I guess, like you said, integrations, right? Even like the Internet of Things, or, you know, when we start using our phone to control, if it's wearing on our wrist, you know, control like lights, temperature. I mean, we can already do that, but it's still scattered a little bit, right? So it's a lot better than it was before, but eventually, you know, our wearable or whatever is to be like your one-stop shop. You can do everything from that, everything that you need. So I guess at the moment right now, like, would you even consider that a phone at that point?
Yeah, well, I think that technology as a whole, I mean, for years now, the holy grail to me would be like technology would get to a point where you wouldn't know that technology is there. That's why all these sci-fi movies, the technology is just normal, you know. For example, I go back to software, because software is pretty much what pushes technology, in my opinion, ahead a lot quicker. Okay, so for example, natural language technologies, okay, linguistics. You know, we're going to get to a point, and we're already getting there anyway. In a lot of these sci-fi movies, you just talk to machines or your home or your car in any language, and it understands you 100%. And it has AI that could understand what you want. You know, it could predict where you're going to go, you know, what decisions that you've had. Yeah. That's going to be, I think, the most important thing in technology, where it's to the point where people do not even think about technology. And so that's going to be exciting, but kind of scary too, you know?
Yeah. But, you know, it's not fiction anymore. It's happening.
Yeah.
It's almost reality.
The thing is, you know, we are already growing accustomed to it. You know, just think of how much time you spend in front of your phone screens. You know, it's like, even like the recent craze of Pokemon Go, which is dying down. I mean, even before Pokemon Go, we spend probably 70% of our time looking at our phone screens. You know, once they embed that into our wearables, our contact lenses, it's all the time. You know, so that'd be interesting.
Even think about this, like, so we're the generation that grew up without it, with it, but this new generation of like kids, they're the ones who really like not going to know the difference, right? So the lives they're going to live are going to be a lot different than, you know, what we know. So it'd be interesting to see that. You know, I see all these kids out there, 1 year old, 2 year old, just glued to the iPad. So yeah, I guess they'll be on the next forefront of what you're talking about, right? So, you know, they'll see the transition from like phones into like a full integration into your life, right?
Yeah, and you know, and this is something that I don't know why, I also did an episode about this. I was thinking about artificial intelligence. You know, I keep thinking about the movie The Terminator. Think about 2001: A Space Odyssey. I think about the movie, especially The Matrix. Okay, even the guy who created Tesla. Okay, I forgot his name, but he talked about the fact that we could be living in a virtual environment. Yeah, Elon Musk. And so I think that's very possible. If you think about how far technology has come, it'll get so advanced because our minds, we cannot tell the difference between reality and you know, it being artificial. You could trick your mind. And so I'm thinking, when it gets so far, I think that movie, The Matrix, and I know there were other theories before the movie, The Matrix. Yeah, Total Recall. That's what it's going to be. You know, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but you wouldn't know at that point anyway.
Yep.
You know, so and they're already doing it. We already are becoming cyborgs. We have been for a long time. Just think about all the artificial prosthetics that we have. You know, and then when nanites get here, and we already have machines going out there. I mean, it's going to be used for military purposes at first. You know, but after that, it's just I don't know, it's integrated in a way where you don't even think about it. You remember the movie Blade Runner as well, you know, with the introduction of androids and so forth. I don't know. It's just it's kind of freaky to think about, especially if you you know, if like my generation, you know, we saw the origin of the first personal computer, the Apple IIes, you know, and prior to the internet, and so you know, like you're saying, the future generations, they will not know of a world without technology.
Of course.
You know? So was there anything else that that you would interested in you, or what do you want to talk about in the geek world?
Yeah, so before we move on from that point, I wonder how much the science fictions really influenced technology, or like the way it grew. Like, I wonder if we didn't have those movies, media, like the books, if technology would be the way it is today, right? Like, I wonder how much of that was an inspiration to push technology in that way.
I think that's a really good point, because a lot of these movie makers, you know, they do base it upon some science. But if you go back to the early, I have one movie that I did talk about in the video. It's called Metropolis. That was made in the 1930s.
Yes.
Okay. And then later on, the whole concept of a robot or android, Isaac Asimov, you know, he had the rule of the robots. You know, the rules.
Yeah.
I mean, and so if you think about it, they kind of help each other. Okay. But I think movies, when we didn't have a lot of science, right, a lot of data to back things up, and it was just mainly theories, I think movies did help push a lot of, or maybe inspire people. Like if you think about the movie, like I said, 2001: A Space Odyssey, you think about the movie Alien or Aliens or any of those movies, Star Wars, you know, Star Trek, you know, Star Trek talked about wormholes, which was just a theory, and actually, you know, a lot of the concepts are coming true. So I do think that sci-fi influences a lot of what really goes on in science, you know, because they take theories, and since they are movies and entertainment, they don't have to prove those theories. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what about this? So going forward, what kind of media that's coming out now is going to inspire like the next wave of technology? Can you think of anything that you've recently seen that, like, you know, might do the same for what the medias that we already mentioned do for technology today?
Most definitely. And I want to go back to something that I've talked about before, but that I think about a lot, and even more so now. It's the open source community. Okay. If you look back into the early ages of programming or hardware or just tech in general, it was a community. And nowadays we are so connected. We have so many different communities, so many pockets. That's where the innovation's happening. Okay, Linux is still the #1 largest open source community in the world. But if you think about your Instagram community, your Facebook community, your Reddit community, to me, that's where the real innovation's happening. You know, and a lot of companies are actually getting their trends and getting ideas of the future from what's happening in the community. So that's where I think where all the innovation's going to happen.
Yeah, just now that we have access to all this raw data and the ability to process it, we're finding out things that we didn't know we wanted, right?
Yep, and now that, you know, with technology, we are able to communicate ideas around the world in a split second, whereas before, you know, you really couldn't, and before you were really controlled by whatever news or governments were allow you to do, right? Because you had that physical barrier, you know. But now, with technologies, obviously some countries are still blocking things, but with technologies, you can express and share ideas a lot quicker than before. This whole idea of collaboration is on another level. And so I think that's really my feeling. That's where all the collaboration is going to happen. I don't think it's just going to be one piece or one main piece of technology, but in terms of concept, it's community. That's what's going to bring the most innovation.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, so, you know, going on to our next point, I think you had a question for me.
I think I had a question about web development in terms of, like, okay, a lot of people who might be watching this, they might be younger, okay? Sure. And so they might be curious as to, you know, what a career in technology. What is some of, like, your real world experience in technology?
Right. So for all the younger people out there, I started programming at around the age of 15 or 16, took it in a high school course, and from there, it's just, I never looked back since then, you know. I guess the biggest thing for me is that I like to be creative, and I think a lot of other hardcore geeks like to be creative too, right? Not only be creative, but grounded and seeing how something works, right? So you kind of see both sides of it. So most of the real world experience I've had, I work for a larger corporation, and it's mostly just support at this point. So I don't do like a whole lot of actual development, which is a bit sad. But yeah, I guess just working with technology and really supporting a business from that aspect. That's been my experience so far as like a career. You know, obviously I want to move more towards development because I love making things. I like being creative. I like seeing something that I make being used, you know, and that's like the biggest driving force for me.
Yeah, and you know, that's one thing that I really love about what technology is able to do, because we're able to do something like this. And I do 100,000% agree with you. If you're a geek, we do have a very creative nature. That's why we like technologies, because it allows us to express ourselves in ways that are sometimes limited by, you know, the environments that we're in, right? And so with that being said, do you think, like, for the younger people, do you think that a corporate career is something that they should aspire to, or are there other options that you think that they should look into while they're young?
So while you're young, I would say a lot of corporate careers, and I'm saying this as a bit of a cynic, that's where careers go to die, unless you want to do the whole management thing and, you know, getting up there. You know, for a corporate career, don't get me wrong, it's great. It's okay. Sorry, I shouldn't say great. It's okay. It's very stable, right? Very predictable. At the same time, sometimes you get comfortable and then you kind of lose that sense of wanting to do more or achieve more from a technology standpoint. Because, I mean, you can always go into management, right? But that's a whole different ballgame. You know, so I would say, you know, get the experience, you know, learn how you work, you know, learn how to work with other people. You know, that's the biggest things that I've, you know, really seen, you know, from my career. Still creative, still have big ideas and dreams, you know, go for it. We're in a world where the barrier of entry is very low. Anyone can get into it. Anyone can get into development. Anyone can make the next big app. You know, technology is our canvas, and we're artists. It's up to us to use the tool sets that we want to and express ourselves from there.
Yeah, and I love that analogy that you used, that we are artists and technology is a canvas for us, because, like, from my own personal corporate experience, and once again, I'm in a different demographic than my brother. So in my demographic, it was normal for you to have a career in only 1 or 2 companies, you know, most of the time 2 to 3 companies max, you know, if you are working in a corporate environment. Now, for my brother's demographic, I'm pretty sure it's not uncommon for people to have 3 to 5 careers. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, I would say even more than 3 to 5. But again, it really depends on your end goals, right? So, you know, the place I'm currently working at right now, I'm not developing a lot of in the way that I want to, right? So I'll be looking for somewhere else to do that.
Yeah.
And that's just the thing with technology companies. Technology moves rapidly, and I feel like your careers will start to move rapidly if you choose to. And yeah, I think for younger people, it's very normal, common to move around.
Yeah.
But it's also easier for us because we're not really held down by anything yet. Like, I don't have a family support, you know. So young, I could just get up and move if I needed to. But again, like I said, corporate, it's stable, it's predictable. If you need to provide for your family, and if you would rather have that safety, then by all means, you know, like, knock it out in the corporate world. But for me, at this age, at this moment in time, you know, I want to move around. I want to get experience. I want to see a very, I guess, horizontal slice, right? I want to see a bit of everything.
Yeah,
yeah,
and I think personally, like, I myself, I have transitioned out of the corporate world, and so I actually do work 100% on the internet. But what I'm seeing is that a shift, you know, and the shift that I'm talking about is we've grown from a corporate type environment to more of a freelancing environment. That's actually where everything's heading, because a lot of companies that I see now, they are not hiring full-time people. They're hiring people with the expertise that they need to get the projects done. And so we're heading into a world where there is going to be a lot more freelancing, okay, freelancing type things. So what that means is if you are a geek, and I even say this on my website where, you know, you could use tech to improve your lives, okay, and I really believe strongly in that, just like the analogy that my brother used. And so if you're a person who is a geek, you actually have an advantage, I think, over the normal population, because the skills that are going to be valuable, meaning what people are going to pay for, is going to be tech related skills. I just don't see that going anywhere, you know. So if you are young and you're starting out, gain tech skills. And the great thing, like what my brother was saying, is the barriers of entries are low, because when I finished school, you had to have a degree to basically get a job, right? But nowadays, a degree is not necessary for you to start making or earning income. Okay, especially if it's tech related. Now, if you're in a job or a career path that is a doctor, you know, or a lawyer, anything that requires schooling, those things require school. They still require school. But anything else, especially if it's tech related, you actually have an advantage. And so I think that for young people, learn as many tech skills as possible. Start something entrepreneurial. That doesn't actually mean you're going to be business owner, but learn how to freelance, you know. And then on top of that, if you do decide to do the corporate thing would be one thing, but you would also have freelancing stuff as well. So then you could, number one, express your creativity because you're learning other things. You're keeping your mind fresh. And then you still have the quote unquote stability of a corporate job. And stability is, I think there really is no stability in the future now, okay, because things have changed now. However, the corporate would be still more stable, you know, than if you would be freelancing and doing entrepreneurial, because that's a learning curve, okay? So that's where I think things are heading. Things are heading more of a freelance skill base. Everything's going to be skill based. And from the last times that I've checked, most companies don't really care as much about what degree you have or what school you graduated from. All they care about is what skills do you have and can you make the money? That's it. And that's the nature of every single business, because if you hire people, which is your number one cost, and they don't have the skills that you need to help them make more money, then that's a waste of money. So that's where I think it's heading. And so if you are a geek, you actually have an advantage.
Yeah. And so again, with like the low barrier to entry, as tech becomes more, you know, modular, so are jobs, right? Because I mean, the jobs are stemmed from the technology. So, you know, before in the big corporate world, only these corporations had the money to play, right, to buy in. But nowadays, you know, it's modular. Anyone can do it. So moving on, you know, very normal, very common. And, you know, you need to keep up. If, you know, you don't learn, you don't adapt, then you're going to be left behind for sure. So, yeah. So for other skills, for, I guess, becoming, to make it as a career, I think you just have the mindset of being able to learn and being able to adapt. That way you're never left behind, right?
Yeah, and I really love that point that you make, is that you have to learn. You have to constantly learn. It's not like the old days where you would, you know, finish your degree and you get into a corporate world and you really don't have to learn much more. You know, you only learn what the companies give you. But nowadays with technology, it changes every single day. And so your competitors, especially the small competitors, they can take you out, you know. And so, you know, whether you do it an entrepreneur, freelancing, or whether you're in a corporate environment, if you're not constantly learning, you will be left behind. And so that's a challenge, you know, but it's inevitable.
Yeah, so when tech changes, jobs change. And when jobs change, you need to change. So, yep, just learn to learn, really. It's probably one of the most important skills you can really have.
Yeah, love to learn. I would say love to learn, because if you don't love learning, you're kind of SOL. I mean, even jobs like McDonald's, okay, they have new machines that they're testing now that would take your orders without a human. So even those jobs are disappearing. So,
but we're just preaching to the choir at this point, because I would say that all nerds love to learn, all geeks love to learn, you know.
Yep.
It's part of what makes us a geek, right? Just being curious and understanding.
Yeah, it is. But I really do believe that a lot of geeks, I agree with you there, they love to learn, but there's another skill that you have to learn outside of that, which is the whole business side of it, okay? I mean, we have tech skills and stuff, but can you convert that into something that could make you money? That's another skill that a lot of geeks and just everybody will have to learn in the future, because you can learn all the technical stuff you want, but if you don't know how to sell those skills and sell yourself, then you're going to be out, basically doing stuff for free, So that's another aspect, and I'll probably get into that in another episode. But I think we've almost ran for an hour. Is there anything else that you want to talk to on this initial episode?
No, not really. It's been great from my side. So
great. And so we're going to end this off. I really want to thank my brother for being here on this episode. And if you haven't seen it, y'all, we did an arcade episode. And thank you so much for watching that. A lot more people watched it. I thought we were at this retro arcade, Arkadia, which is really, really awesome. If you haven't seen it, I will leave a link in the description, and I'll also leave a link above. But we're going to try to do this regularly. If my brother's schedule and my schedule works out there, we're going to do some more Geek Bros talk and talk about stuff that's really geeky. So thanks for watching. Any comments or ideas, leave them below. And don't forget, if you like these videos, you found value in them, be sure to subscribe. And don't forget that I am also on Snapchat at Geek Outdoors. Now, is there anything else that you want to me, brother? Anything you wanted to pitch?
No, thanks, guys. Definitely let us know what you're interested in and what we should talk about. Let's make a community and let's learn together. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, y'all. We're going to be signing off, and we'll see you in another episode of geekoutdoors.com.